Yeah, cool. So thanks for coming, everyone. My name's Derek Pritchard. I'm the lead animator at PlaySide Studios. I've been working in the Melbourne game industry for about 13 years now. In that time, done some work on Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition, did a lot of the work on the cutscenes, the pre-rendered and the in-game as well. I did sold a Skyward Sword as well, some of the cinematic stuff for that, the HD report. And more recently, been working at PlaySide on Age of Darkness, Final Stand. So I'm assuming you're all big fans of the game, you've all played it, 100%. But for those who need a refresher, we'll go ahead and play the trailer.
Long ago, in the Age of Darkness, the land of Eredar was ravaged by battles.
We move with haste, for night draws near.
I will not fail you!
Our only enemy are the nightmares of the Veil. We must cooperate. I need someone I can trust.
More nightmares are coming our way. Hold them off!
We're here to help you defend this town.
Save yourselves!
We will rise.
There are too many of them! They just keep coming!
Age of Darkness, Flames of Retribution. Available now.
Ooh. Very cool. Like I said, old news because you've all played it, so it's all good. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about cutscenes. The process and pipeline for making the in-game cutscenes. Won't really touch on the pre-rendered stuff because that's kind of a whole different thing. I will be playing some clips from other games with cutscenes, purely just as a reminder that cutscenes are hard, and not because it's funny. So, I think we'll be touching on is the reliable animation practices to lessen the workload. So, with the amount of cutscenes we need to get done, the kind of narrative vision of the game, it's a bit much for a small team. So we need to make the most out of the fewest animations. So unique challenges to Age of Darkness. Being an RTS, I think adding a campaign and especially doing cutscenes within it kind of brings its own challenges. So we're going to go over into that. Secrets for success and lessons learned. So yeah, all of our mistakes we'll let you know, so you don't have to make them yourself. Yeah. So the next step in our journey was to look at reference, kind of know what we're aiming for. So we looked at a lot of other RTSs, or classic kind of ones. With so many tools available nowadays for doing in-game cutscenes, I think it's really important to limit your scope. So looking at some of these bigger budget games, it can be quite easy to aim for something that you might not have the budget to achieve. So when I'm looking at reference, the first thing I do is I look at what these games don't do rather than what they do. So some examples of that. Do we really need lip sync? So in a lot of RTSs, they just do like simple either mouth flaps or just there's no facial animation at all. It's just a head nodding up and down to show they're talking. So if it's good enough for Age of Empires or Diablo, it's probably good enough for your project as well. Yes, and limiting the number of pre-rendered cinematics, because that is a whole another beast that requires a whole other set of tools that can really don't apply to actual game work you're doing. So yeah, really important to make sure that you don't overscope on those kind of things. Cool. So jumping into dependencies. So for cutscenes, being kind of at the end of the production cycle, it's really important to kind of figure out as soon as possible whether or not you actually can reach them. It sort of comes together right at the very end of the production cycle. We've got some pretty amazing producers at PlaySide. So one exercise that we did recently, this is for a single mission. So every department broke down the tasks that they needed to get done to get their work finished all the way to launch for that one mission. And then we spent a day just making noodle soup, figuring out what connects to what has to get done before what. And then they went away and made it a little bit prettier. And from that, we can assign our roles and responsibilities and establish our communication lines. So it's really important to make sure that all departments are on board with exactly what they need to do and how they need to make it for the next department to take over and do their bit. So feature owners. It's really important on a project like this where you've got multiple departments coming into one kind of feature to know who is the person who you can go to get answers. Pods, track teams, separating out the work into a kind of core team of people who are kind of specialize in it. Cutscene stand-ups, anything you can do to get that daily communication up between the teams. And Slack channels or teams or whatever you're using to kind of like keep those questions kind of contained and recorded. Scope and schedule. So once we've figured out our dependencies, we need to start figuring out whether or not we can actually achieve all this work within the time frame. It's really important to know that cutscenes require unique tool sets, skill sets, and assets. A lot of the times we're going to try to reuse as much as we can from the actual game, but that's not always possible. Department deadlines and approval gates. So again, meeting that kind of goal by the end, because cutscenes, they kind of come together right at the very end of production cycle. We need to make sure that everyone's hitting their deadlines so that we actually have enough time to get them done. Yeah, and working in passes. So this is really important for like audio and VFX. They often quite don't know what it is they actually need to be making until they have a first pass of the cutscene, and that's very true. It's very hard to it's hard to go through the script and figure out exactly what audio needs to get done in terms of special effects. Definitions of done for all departments. So this is again going back to those dependency managements. How do we know that when one department is maybe slipping over their deadlines, what is it that they were actually trying to aim for? And can we kind of rein it back into that goal? So, yeah. Cool. So once we're actually moving into production, the very first step is a script. So Age of Darkness has over 1,200 lines of dialogue, 60 cutscenes, and the runtime for those cutscenes is just over an hour. All those lines of dialogue, they have to get written. They have to have a designer to sit there and coordinate that, whether or not it makes sense for the missions that they're making. You have to cast voice actors. They have to be booked into recording sessions. Audio has to go through and clean up all that work. So you can kind of see why it's really important to get your scope under control. Because if you're kind of doing all the actual cutscene work right at the very end, there's a lot of work to get done before you can actually start. All departments need to be up to date as the script will define their workload. If the script, for example, is talking about a pair of binoculars and you've written that 6 months before the mission was actually getting made, you might quickly find out that that pair of binoculars, we don't have the scope to make it anymore. So, write mission statements to give an overview of the narrative goals. It's really hard to get your entire team up to speed on exactly what it is they need to do. So one of those ways is just by kind of summarizing and making sure that everyone's on board with those summaries. Everything can and will change. This is very true. So limit interactions and being too descriptive. Video pickups are expensive. So if we now need to go back and change that line of dialogue to stop referencing a pair of binoculars, that is going to cost money, and that might cost more than actually just making the pair of binoculars, but that's a scheduling issue. Cool, but cut early. Get all the departments to weigh in on the feasibility. It's very easy to write down something that is too hard to actually make. So if you're going to start cutting stuff, better do it as soon as possible. So the one question that I always ask myself when I'm going through the script before moving in an engine is this worth stopping the game for? Could this be in-game dialogue? It's very easy to play dialogue over the game. It's very hard to make a cutscene, so it would be worth it. Best save for characters being brought together and introducing new objectives. So if two characters are already standing next to each other, if they're already traveling together, I would always say that should be in-game dialogue. It's not really worth pausing the game for and kind of bringing people together because they're already standing right next to each other. But in terms of the opposite, if you actually do need to get your characters from one location to another, a cutscene can actually be a really great way to do that time skip. Yeah. Move lines about mission objectives to outside the cutscene for those who skip. So, show of hands, who here has skipped a cutscene in a game before? Get out. No. So, for those who skip, it's very easy for the people to get confused about what they actually do need to do next, especially if the mission objective context was within the cutscene that they just went over. So an easy way to trim down your cutscenes would be to take those sort of ending lines that kind of reinforce what they're about to do next and actually just push it outside the cutscene. Swarm tech. So this is going to be unique for your project, but for Age of Darkness, the main draw, the thing that people are actually playing the game for, is to have over 65,000 units on screen at one time. It is not the cutscenes, unfortunately. I guess that's true for all your projects as well. If you're trying to add cutscenes into your game, I guess it's just really important to take a stock of what it is that people are actually playing the game for. And if cutscenes isn't that, then you can easily trim down your scope. So in terms of stuff that's specific for Age of Darkness, we used vertex animation textures. So these are basically static meshes. So all those units on screen actually don't have bones. They're actually static meshes with a vertex shader on them that animates the vertices. So some of the downsides to that is we don't have true animation blending from one animation into another. And it's difficult to do character interactions. Attaching something to a bone is very, very simple in a skeletal mesh. It's kind of hard to do it in vertex textures. You can, but it's just not easy. And there also are limits on vertex texture sizes because it is a image. And some of the characters are blowing up to like 300 meg, stuff like that. And the import times get pretty long. And the upsides is that cutscenes can utilize game functions. You don't have to build dual systems. And there's no performance cost. So it's kind of a bit of a trade-off, but if you embrace the limitations of your game, you can generally reuse a lot more than having to kind of create a dual system. Cool. So now that I've read the script, one of the first things I did was break down an animation library. So these are generic cutscene animations. This grew substantially as we actually got into the meat of making the cutscenes, but this essentially gave animation something to do while the script was actually still being written. Cool. So now that we've actually got our animations, we're going to go through and actually, the process of making them. So here we've got Aurelia doing her idol. It's really important to know that the vast majority of cutscenes are going to be people standing around doing nothing. If one person's talking, the other person is just standing there listening. So if you go a bit too crazy with the animations, they might not fit as many cases as you would like. They might seem out of place. A personally led idle pose to a character will bring it more to life than any other animation. So yeah, this is really true. Like I said, most characters will be just kind of standing there either talking or standing there and listening. So getting as much personality as you can into those poses will really help things. And again, really important, the script will change. It's an animator's dream to kind of animate every single line of dialogue, make it nice and bespoke and beautiful, but it's kind of a waste of time if the script is just going to get rewritten, which it will, multiple times. Cool, controlling the chaos. How will the player break this? Especially for cutscenes, we need those to be the same every single time for every single player, but to have to take into account player actions, it can really become a bit of a nightmare. For any engineers in the room, this line's for you. Cutscenes will require you to reverse engineer every single gameplay system you have built. So you know that awesome weather system I asked you to make and I spent you weeks? Now I need you to make it stop working when the cutscene starts. So it's easier to build into your gameplay systems early, the ability to circumvent them during cutscenes rather than back out later. To have to go back to an old system 6 months later, just because you found out that it was messing up cutscenes, it can be quite timely. So easier to kind of build that in earlier. Be aware that changes to game systems like pathfinding collection will break cutscenes. So even when the cutscene is done, QA can't really rest. They still need to keep playing them because every tweak to those systems is going to impact them, especially things like timing. If you've got a character walking from A to B and you need them to be on B at a certain timing, if that's controlled by your pathfinding system, any changes to that will change that timing. Yeah. So for us, the best way we could control the player's actions was doing a fade to black. It's a little bit boring, but it is also tried and true. So it provides a gentle way to kind of signal to the player that a cutscene is about to begin, and lets us do a lot of stuff in the background in that second of black. So it ensures identical parameters for every player. We were doing things like disabling player influence or hiding buildings. We're pausing the game in the background, so it would be kind of crappy if you went into a cutscene, you came back out and all your units were dead. Triggering objectives, removing blockers. So cutscenes during that fade to black is kind of a really great moment to change the map layout, update objectives if you need to. And swapping to hidden cutscene only actors. We'll go into this in a second. You can see in that screenshot there's like 4 mercs all standing around. That's because 3 of those are hidden. They're all cutscene actors who are just kind of standing there waiting to kind of begin their sequence. It's really helpful to be able to like separate those out from the gameplay characters so that I know that they'll always be standing exactly where I need to when the cutscene starts. Yeah, repositioning characters and enemies. This is true for the main game characters, so it gives us an opportunity as the screen's black to put people in the right positions. And it's a reliable checkpoint for autosaves. For designers, they can feel safe knowing that as that cutscene ends, all the characters are standing in the right positions, and it gives them a place to kind of save the game, knowing that, yeah, they're not going to get stuck in a death loop if they're about to die when an autosave hits. Worlds within worlds. So this was especially true for Age of Empires. They would actually separate some of their larger cutscenes in totally separate maps. This does include a load screen though, in and out of those cutscenes, so it might not be something you want to do. For an Age of Darkness, we kind of chose to keep the cutscenes within the actual missions themselves. This lets us take advantage of like cutscene or gameplay logic, choices that the players have made of continue into the cutscenes. But we still want to kind of keep those cutscene areas separated from the gameplay as much as possible to make them kind of safe from player influence. So one of the easy options is to pick a corner of the map that you can't get to, is being unused, and turn that into a little cutscene area. Rapidly reduce cutscene production and testing times. So knowing that the cutscene is going to be exactly the same for everyone every single time, and be able to test against that is actually really helpful for QA. To know what the cutscene should look like so that they can know that it is a bug or not is really helpful. Like I said, hidden cutscene actors to keep the cutscene logic safe from unpredictability of gameplay assets. So, for example, with the telescope there, if that telescope was in a position that it had to be for pathfinding or collision, if you have a secret cutscene version of that telescope, you could position it out of the way, put it where you need to, and then during that fade to black, it'll just be back where it was. So separate cutscenes can be worked on simultaneously to design. As someone working on cutscenes, it's really helpful to know that what I'm doing isn't going to break the game, because I do often. Cool. So now that the script's all written down, we've got our animations, we need a way to time out the sequence. So on Age of Darkness, we use Replica. There's a lot of programs out there, but this one is essentially a text-to-speech program that will read out your lines with a certain kind of cadence of people actually saying the lines, so it gives you a pretty good timing of what the actual video is going to be like when it gets recorded. Invest in automated solutions, processing, and allows designers to help. So audio is usually pretty underrepresented on projects. Any way you can help them out is definitely beneficial, especially with the workload of changing those scripts, adding, removing, stuff like that. So temp audio allows for cutscenes first pass to be done long before the voiceover is recorded. So again, with those dependencies, the real cutscene work, the polish kind of coming all together right at the end, anything you can do before then is going to save you a lot of time. And tomorrow there's going to be a talk all about the VO process, Age of Darkness, so please check it out. So now I'm going to play a before shot of one of our cutscenes. So this is straight from the designer. We're using temp characters, temp audio. We're throwing everything into the scene, ready for myself to come in and do a pass on it.
How many times must we hear these dusty tales of yours, Hector?
It's Bishop Hector, Brother Visigoth. Mind your tongue.
Such dusty tales remind us of the Order's purpose. You ought to respect humanity's history and your place in it.
We know our purpose, Bishop. We serve the realm and its denizens.
We serve, yes, but protection of the Dark Crystal sits above all else. Something we've neglected of late.
All right. This looks the place. Reports indicated an incident occurred here, but we don't yet know the nature. Norek and I will establish the situation. Follow at a distance and stay vigilant. The light protect you both.
This town, it's been torn apart. What happened here? Bandits.
Bandits don't raid a town and leave the loot behind.
What then?
Beautiful. Yeah. So from that first pass, that's when I'd kind of jump in and maybe rearrange things a bit, trying to make sure that the big main objectives for having that cutscene in the first place are in there. So a lot of the time it'll be making sure that the camera is kind of pointing towards any kind of big set pieces and also changing the layout so there's a bit of a flow from gameplay. Layout pass should be done before cutscenes, long before cutscene minimized works. So anytime that the level design has to get completely changed, if mission objectives get updated, cutscenes will be impacted by that. So if we can get set dressing done, it kind of really helps to kind of frame the cameras, make sure we know what we're pointing at. And also it gives a good idea of like where characters should stand, really. Yep, use set dressing to fill the frame. So, like I said before, a lot of the cutscenes in your game are going to be people just standing around talking. Really, anything you can do to make that a bit more interesting to look at will really, keep the player interested. Reinforcing player objectives with every opportunity. It's really hard to oversimplify mission objectives. Oftentimes, you can think that it's so obvious for what the player needs to do next, but there'll always be someone who has absolutely no idea what's happening. So taking every opportunity you can to make sure their goals are crystal clear definitely helps. In terms of the camera, once you take control away from the player, the camera off the player, You need to take responsibility for how that's going to flow in and out of the game, especially if they were looking at something really important to them. So yeah, trying to avoid something like that, basically. Yeah. Create a consistent camera language, set strict bounds to avoid disorientation, and respect artist quality bars. Age of Empire, or Age of Darkness, being an RTS, it is that top-down kind of game. So a lot of the assets in it have all been made with that in mind. It'd be pretty rude of me to suddenly go into a first-person perspective and have all the artist's hard work look a bit ugly. So we generally kind of keep the cameras raised up, but this is also helpful because that's how the player is familiar with the environment. If I brought the camera down too low, all of a sudden these areas that they've been staring at for a while might suddenly not look that familiar anymore. Establish and use existing landmarks to ground the player's sense of space. So here in Mission 3, we had several cutscenes that took place in the same area, but I always made sure that I kept the keep in view, because that's kind of a visual landmark for the player. They know exactly where that is. So when the cutscene fades up from black, they're not confused as to where this is taking place. Camera cuts are the most powerful tool, especially on Age of Empires. Getting into the behind the scenes on that, there was a lot of jank that they were hiding with camera cuts. And the same true for Age of Darkness as well. Sometimes if a pathfinding issue is too difficult to solve, or it's going to result in you having to kind of redo all the collisions for the map, it might be easier just to cut away from that. So with that in mind, we'll check back in after we've done a pass on that cutscene.
How many times must we hear these dusty tales of yours, Hector?
It's Bishop Hector, Brother Vizago. Mind your tongue.
Such dusty tales remind us of the Order's purpose. You ought to respect humanity's history and your place in it.
We know our purpose, Bishop. We serve the realm and its denizens.
We serve, yes, but protection of the Dark Crystals sits above all else. Something we've neglected of late.
All right. This looks the place. Reports indicated an incident occurred here, but we don't yet know the nature. Merrick and I will establish the situation, follow at a distance, and stay vigilant. The light protect you both.
This town, it's been torn apart. What happened here? Bandits?
Bandits don't raid a town and leave the loot behind.
Cool, so looking a lot better. So now that we've got everything in place, it's about kind of bringing in those final touches. So the big work is coordinating with the VFX and audio. Like I said before, they kind of don't know exactly what they need to make until right at the very end, once there's a first pass in. So checking in with them, making sure they're aware of the assets that they need to make and how they're kind of going to fit into the cutscene is super important. Cutscenes make very great marketing material. If you watch any like gameplay trailer, you'll actually notice that it's kind of a combination, usually a mix of gameplay cuts and cutscene footage. And that's because it really helps kind of break up, so it's not all gameplay or all cutscenes. So definitely worth investing in, for your marketing material. Iterating tools to speed up workflows and playthroughs. So one of the biggest time sinks on doing cutscenes is just having to watch the cutscenes over and over and over. You make a small tweak, you'll watch through a 2-minute cutscene, get to that right at the end where you've made your change and you find out that it didn't work. And then you have to sit there, make another change, and then watch the entire thing through again. So any tools you can make for your project to help speed that up of jumping back and forth will be a massive time saver. Plans will change. This is true for basically everything on game dev, but particularly true for cutscenes because any changes down the line will kind of reverberate up into cutscenes. So level layout reworks, script rewrites, character redesigns, mission objective revisions, all this kind of stuff does impact cutscenes. So that's, again, why it's really important to work in passes. So getting in a quick first pass, make sure that everything's still relevant with the script and the characters and the mission flow, and then going back and changing stuff as required. Some big things that we learnt on Age of Darkness, I would want to do differently next time. One of the things is empowering designers to get a better first pass, closer to kind of shippable. These are up. Again, it's cutting down on that rework time. If the designers go through, they throw everything into the scene, the closer they can get to a first pass is going to massively save you time when you actually jump on to take over. So I think we want to invest in templates, default cameras, setting all those kind of things up, because on Age of Darkness it was quite manual for each one, so yeah. Investments in quality of life tools will pay for themselves times over. So I've talked a bit about tools, but it is quite unique to your project and your workflows. For us, it was things related to, playing through a cutscene, not having to actually play the map and run up to where that cutscene is going to begin, be able to trigger that cutscene from the editor and just watch it through was super helpful. A lot of those audio tools meant that we could quickly change the script, do a quick re-import, run it through Replica, and that would set the timing and correct things. Communication is key, knowing your dependencies and coordinate around them. Again, this is true for almost every part of game dev, but in particular with cutscenes, because of those dependencies, because everything comes together at the end, because it's from every kind of department, really. Knowing who's in charge of what and when they need to get things done by is super, super important. It's also an incredible upskilling opportunity for both the studio portfolio and individuals. Cutscenes, they take a lot of work. They are very much a choice. Like, you could tell your story in a million ways that don't involve cutscenes. Might save you the headache, but at the end of the day, it does make for great marketing material, and it's also a great opportunity for the artists and designers working on their maps to think of their work a bit more cinematically, which it's a great opportunity. So with that, I'll also play the follow-up to where we're at now with Age of Darkness.
I want justice!
You'll not hear her screams much longer. We will wipe this land clean of their corrupting presence. And who might you be?
Aurelia.
Breathe deeply of this essence.
What is this stuff? It's incredible. Vizago and the Volatists offer freedom and power. Goodbye, Edwin. You have no idea the power that I have now.
We must inform the Bishop of Vizago's return and assemble a force to stop him.
Dark Crystal Essence is the key to our power.
I'd rather die standing than kneel for a lunatic.
As you wish.
Your time is over. We cannot be stopped.
Aurelia, come back with me, girl. It's not too late. I'm sorry I can't be who you want me to be.
Cool, fun stuff. I've got plenty of time for questions. Far away. Got a microphone. Yeah.
Thank you. Just curious, like, what kind of team size was required for that, like, cutscene at the end there? And, like, was there any kind of, like, outsourcing out of studio as well? Or just purely in-house with, like, whatever you have?
So that trailer then was, like, cut of a whole bunch of different work. The actual team size on Age of Darkness, like 40 people, I reckon. PlaySide has 300 total, so it's only one of the projects we've got going on right now. In terms of animators, it was myself. We had one help out with the pre-rendered stuff, so there's hero spotlights. I've also had another one jump in and out, but for the most part, doing the actual cutscene work, it was all myself. So again, being 60 plus cutscenes an hour runtime, you got to kind of make use of what you can, really. It's not really possible. I'm good, but I'm not that good. So, yeah. Cool. Thanks for your question.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm curious about like the dialogue and the narrative aspect of these cutscenes. Like, how do you like? Is there a tool set that you use to use the dialogue and cutscenes and like port them into Unity, or like specifically like how do you get that from there into your your cutscene essentially?
Yeah, so the question was about how do we import audio into the game. So for us, the script is written just in a straight up Google Doc. It's one that anyone can access, anyone can read, which is really important. We do have a narrative designer who actually wrote the script, but he coordinated quite heavily with design, going through and actually writing out exactly what needed to be where and when. And then as the designer's actually going into the levels, it was a lot of tweaks, a lot of reworks, a lot of rewrites. So for them, it was just simply a script that one of the engineers wrote up, and it's an automatic process to pull that Google Sheet into Replica, and then from that, it automatically splits it straight into Unreal. So for them, it was quite simple to make a tweak, run it through, and chuck it into the game. Again, it'll be unique for all your projects, but for, I guess, us, it was Replica, but there's a lot of other programs out there you could use do the same thing. You could even like record your own audio, but again, any kind of way you can to automate that, script that up, using Google APIs or anything like that is super helpful. Yeah. Thank you.
You were saying the characters are exported via vertex animation. Do you have to approach the character animation and the character rigging in any different ways based on that?
No, not really. The only so again with that characters is any different to regular ones? Not really. The only one is just knowing that those blends in and out of your animations have to be rock solid, really. You can't kind of rely on the game to kind of fill those gaps for you without having to make like a really massive amount of like transition animations, which we just didn't really have the budget to do. So it was kind of, I guess, embracing what it was, really. And especially for Age of Darkness, being an RTS, having those kind of hard snaps between animations, it didn't look out of place. So it was heartbreaking for myself, but was an acceptable, acceptable change. Yeah.
Hi. So this was Unreal Engine 4, correct?
Yes. So the game was made in Unreal Engine 4.6. We're planning on upgrading to 5.2, I think, for our next one. But yeah.
In Unreal, have you found that there's been any frustrations or problems unique to that engine for your animation pipeline when you're, say, switching from regular gameplay to cutscene?
Not so much on the engine side of it, but the problems we encountered were mostly self-inflicted, purely just because with Swarm Tech, with embracing that, it meant that we were kind of subject to all of the having to use the mission editor to do our cutscenes. We couldn't take advantage of, say, Unreal's like movie cues and all that kind of stuff and sequences. So we had to kind of essentially build out a system for making cutscenes within the gameplay that already existed. So a lot of the frustrations purely just came around that, sort of repurposing designers' tools to make art with. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Was there a difference in the process between doing a cutscene for the in-game mechanical stuff besides the more cinematic cutscenes that you did?
Yeah, so I think the biggest difference is that you're having to take into account the flow of the mission. A lot of the choices that were made for maybe character positions or camera positions or what they're looking at was purely based around the mission objectives themselves. So when you're doing a highlight reel, one of those kind of ones, you're kind of just free from all of that, and you can make it as kind of impressive as you wanted. So a lot of the times we actually kind of pushed maybe the cameras a little bit too far in the cutscenes, and it didn't fit, or it kind of seemed out of place to do like crazy camera cuts and panning shots and all that kind of stuff. In an RTS, it's just not really, doesn't really fit, I guess. Again, with that of respecting artists' quality, everything basically in the game was made to be viewed only from a top-down perspective, so you kind of couldn't get too fancy, but again, embracing that and making things a bit more kind of smooth and subtle and keeping it all aligned with the players' expectations of this being a top-down game was, yeah, super helpful.
Hi. What software did you use to create the vertex animation textures, and what was that pipeline like? Was it just Houdini or something?
Yeah, so it's Houdini. So it's Maya to Houdini to Unreal. So we use the Houdini plugin that's in Unreal, and from that it's essentially an export process that takes all the animations get baked out into FBXs, then they get imported into Houdini, they run it through to spit out the textures, and then those get imported back into Unreal, which we applied as a shader on top of the static meshes for the characters. The actual programmer side of how that works, I have no idea. Yeah.
With the whole process of development for cutscenes, how frequently do changes and rewrites get made with the coordinated nature of the studio? Does it go through before it has to finally be locked in for a final pass?
So it's constantly. And some of them are even yourself, like working on a cutscene, you might decide this line of dialogue doesn't really fit. And the reason for that is because the line of dialogue was written like 6 months ago. And the mission got completely rewritten. The objectives or the characters just don't even, maybe there's characters in your cutscene that don't even exist anymore. They got written out at some point. So it's choice not only from narrative to go through and rewrite and make sure that it is still telling the story that we want to tell as the missions evolve, but it is also an artistic one as well, for you to be able to sit down and say, I don't think this fits in what I'm trying to make here. And then it's just a conversation. So again, it's that conversation, communication is key. Yeah.
Are there any aspects of story writing that you didn't make note of that you would personally exclude from cutscenes, and why?
Yeah, so the biggest one for me was whenever I was reading through the script to kind of get an idea of what this cutscene is going to be, the biggest thing I look for is descriptive stuff. So if the dialogue itself actually has characters pointing at something, they're referencing something that needs to exist and currently doesn't, that's always sort of something that immediately has to start a conversation with art to see, do we have the budget to actually make this thing that they're kind of talking about, this asset, this prop, this effect, this explosion, whatever. So again, it's not something you need to omit, because again, it would kind of make the story a bit boring if nothing exciting ever happened. But it's something that you just need to be really careful of, that if you're going to write in a reference to something that might not exist yet, figuring out whether or not you have the budget to make that thing so the line makes sense. Yeah.
Hello. Are you able to tell us a bit about your process when blocking out a cutscene, like when tackling drastic changes? Like, do you start with the terrain or a sketch and then do an animation pass?
So the benefit of having that block out list of generic animations was that I could very roughly do a first pass using what I had. So it meant that rather than kind of approaching things, trying to fill every gap with a new animation, I'd always try and make the cutscene from start to end using what I've got to see whether or not it actually really needs anything more than what I have currently. And oftentimes it didn't. A lot of like I said before, a lot of cutscenes are people just standing around talking. So as long as you've got enough animations to fill those gaps of people just standing there either talking or listening, it often did the job. Cool. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, one more.
Thanks, Derek. You talked about the importance of tools. With Age of Darkness, how many of those tools were third-party tools that you guys just bought or licensed, and how many were built sort of in-house for your specific needs?
So I think other than like Animbot, which we've used in Maya for helping out with the animation side of things, again, it was that thing that we were trying to use repurposed designer tools to make cutscenes out of. So almost all of the tools that we needed to build, we had to make. And they were bespoke for cutscenes. So again, going back to that idea that being aware that when you're going to start out making cutscenes, that a lot of the stuff you're going to need, you probably don't have. There are third-party tools out there, but often the story you're trying to tell is going to require stuff that just doesn't exist, really. So again, keeping up those lines of communication with engineering to make sure that they can actually help you make what you want to make. Cool. All right, that's it. Thank you very much.